and welcome to another sermon from Mount Olives Church. My name is Pastor Phil Worthington, which I'm assuming obviously most of you know, but I would hope that you might be sharing this with people from outside the church. If you're not, then please feel free to do so. I think it would be great to see a wider audience engaging with what we're doing online. And today I'm going to be doing a sermon about wisdom. I'm going to be doing it from Kings, so let's have a look at that right now. So if you have a look at 1 Kings 3 to 14, I do all my verses from the New Living Translation, but you pick whichever you prefer. And in these verses, we're going to be having a look at what Solomon does when God offers him something. So let's have a look. It says that Solomon loved the Lord and followed all the decrees of his father David, except that Solomon too offered sacrifices and burned incense at the local places of worship. The most important of these places of worship was at Gibeon. So the king went there and sacrificed 1,000 burnt offerings. That night the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream, and God said, "What do you want? Ask, and I will give it to you." Now, wouldn't this be great? Yeah, this is almost like he's been offered sort of a blank check from God. And I imagine that most of us have been in that sort of situation where we've thought about what we would do if we were offered a wish or 3 wishes, that whole, what would happen if a genie came out of a bottle. We watched the live version of Aladdin the other day, and of course Aladdin's a classic tale of he rubs a lamp, he gets the genie coming out, and the genie gives him 3 wishes, and how is he best to use those wishes? And we get it contrasted between Aladdin, who's pure of heart, and Jafar, who wants to use the lamp for his own purposes and make himself powerful. So I don't know what your wishes would be. Personally, I think my first wish would be that all my other wishes would turn out exactly as I wanted them to, because it always seems to be the case that when you make these wishes, they just seem to trip you up in some way. So I think my first wish would be all my other wishes should be come out exactly as I want them to. But then I don't know what my other wishes would be. Maybe I'd have a wish about knowledge. Maybe I'd have a wish about money. I think I'd have to see how I felt at the time. Certainly, when we dream about these things, those are the sorts of things we think of. But let's have a look at what Solomon says, because Solomon doesn't go for any of those classic sort of things. Solomon says, "You showed great and faithful love to your servant, my father David, because he was honest and true and faithful to you. And you have continued to show this great and faithful love to him today by giving him a son to sit on his throne. Now, O Lord my God, you have made me king instead of my father David, but I am like a little child who doesn't know his way around. And here I am in the midst of your own chosen people, a nation so great and numerous they cannot be counted. Give me an understanding heart so that I can govern your people well and know the difference between right and wrong, for who by himself is able to govern this great people of yours?" Well, what a great choice. He basically asks for wisdom, and in some versions of the Bible, that's what he says there. In some translations, it says the word wisdom. And so actually, he's asking for something that we wouldn't always think of as the first thing we want to ask. Now, before I go any further with this, just to be very clear, and as a little side note, God is not a genie granting wishes. Sometimes we can treat him that way with our prayers, but Solomon understands that he is in the presence of a king much greater than himself, and he humbles himself before God. So the point is that God is not a genie in a bottle. He's not a heavenly vending machine. We can't just say to God, "This is what I am demanding from you. This is what I require." Actually, God is giving Solomon, as I said, to a certain degree, a blank check, but that doesn't mean that Solomon can just be cheeky about that. Solomon has to understand his presence before God and his purpose before God. So just to be very clear, I don't want anybody saying, "Oh, you're just presenting God as a genie in a bottle." That is not the case at all. Solomon understands that he is able to ask for wisdom, and so he does ask for wisdom. And I think because of that, it's easy to think, okay, well, this is a point where Solomon just gains wisdom like that. But actually, he makes a wise choice in asking for wisdom. That sounds like a strange thing, doesn't it? But Proverbs 4:7 says, "Getting wisdom is the wisest thing you can do." To a certain extent, we need to be wise in understanding that we need wisdom. Wisdom begets wisdom. By being wise, we can understand that we need more wisdom in our lives. Albert Einstein said, and I hope you understand he's a wise man and a clever man, that wisdom was not a product of schooling, but of the lifelong attempts to acquire it. What he's saying is that actually it is wise to want wisdom. It is wise to want to acquire more wisdom, just like it says in Proverbs. We need to be people who are wise enough to understand that wisdom is a great thing, maybe the greatest thing that we could have. That because we have wisdom, we can then have other things in our lives. Because let's have a look at what God does here. God responds by praising Solomon. He says, the Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for wisdom. So God replied, because you have asked for wisdom in governing my people with justice, and have not asked for a long life, or wealth, or the death of your enemies, I will give you what you have asked for. I will give you a wise and understanding heart, such as no one else has had or ever will have. And I will also give you what you did not ask for, riches and fame. No other king in all the world will be compared to you for the rest of your life. And if you follow me and obey my decrees and my commands as your father David did, I will give you a long life. You see, actually, even though Solomon doesn't ask for all these other things, he gets them because God understands that he has asked wisely for wisdom. As I said, hope that doesn't put your head in circles there. He's asking wisely to get more wisdom, I think. I think that's really it. And it actually says that Solomon recognizes after this, he wakes up and it was a dream in which he was talking to God. That doesn't mean it wasn't real, but I think there's a sense where God is actually highlighting to Solomon, you are already wise. You are already wise enough to ask for wisdom. That is a very wise thing to do. And so recognizing that Solomon prizes wisdom and God's wisdom especially, and we'll get onto that in a bit, above all else, and actually is humble enough to say to God, I cannot do this by myself, I need your wisdom. Well, God says, okay, because you essentially humbled yourself before me, because you are wise, I will grant you this wisdom that you ask for. I will grow you in wisdom. Because no matter how much wisdom we have, we might have enough wisdom to ask for some more wisdom, but we can always have some more. It's not like we are the wisest people in the world. God is the wisest, and we are just always playing catch up no matter what we do. So, okay, if wisdom is such a great thing, and if wisdom is something that at the very least we need to be wise enough to start off with, how do we get it? If Solomon already started off as wise and then he asked for more wisdom, well, how do we, as people who maybe don't feel very wise, how do we get wisdom in our lives? How do we have all this wisdom that Solomon got? Well, let's have a look at that. So if I go to the next slide. Oh, first of all, you have to recognize that knowledge is not wisdom itself. Now, I don't know about you. There you go. Let's have me in there as well. I don't know about you, but we've been watching Spring Harvest Home this week and we're absolutely loving it. And Spring Harvest is a great thing. I thoroughly recommend it to all of you. I thoroughly recommend that you go on YouTube, search for Spring Harvest, and watch all those videos. I know that if I wanted to, there's pretty much a conference I could go to, a Christian conference, almost every week, really. There's always something going on. People often recommend me books and teaching series. I could spend all day, every day, just watching videos on YouTube of different sermons, really good sermons, and never get to the end of it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing to do, but actually, if we spend all our time attending conferences and reading books and trying to pursue knowledge, often we're actually hearing just the same messages over and over again. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that eventually we don't really grow because all we're doing is just hearing the same stuff. We can end up with a whole bookcase full of books that have all sorts of knowledge, but are we actually applying that? Are we even reading them, to be fair? Sometimes we just like gaining knowledge. We like gaining the thing for showing it off on the bookshelf. We like having the knowledge just so we can show other people how clever we are. Now, you know what? This is not me just pointing a finger. I have a bookcase full of books that I fully intend to read. I've read probably half of them. There are loads of books that I enjoy, and I dip into one, I dip into another. I love gaining knowledge. But actually, sometimes I just like having books because they're in a nice series and they look good on the shelf as well. I have bought Bible commentaries before because actually I want to complete the set. I like completing sets of things, so it's not a clever way of gaining knowledge. I'm not even gaining knowledge from that. I'm just gaining things. So we have to be a bit careful that we're not trying to just go to conferences, buy books and so on. First of all, we mustn't do it just to show off, and secondly, we mustn't do it just for the sake of the knowledge itself. I mean, knowledge is fun. I really love gaining all sorts of knowledge. If you've been to any of my quizzes, you'll know I really love trivia and knowledge, and I'm sorry if some of my quiz questions completely bamboozled you last time we did a quiz. But I really love knowledge. I love that. But that's not what we're meant to be all about. We are meant to be applying that knowledge as well. let's just turn me off for a second. There we go. So Hebrews 6:1 says, so let us stop going over the basic teachings about Christ again and again. Let us go on instead and become mature in our understanding. You see, the understanding part of that is really crucial. That we are not just meant to be gaining knowledge, we are meant to be understanding that knowledge. It's how we process it that makes a big difference. Let me give you an example. Kitchen gadgets. So I love kitchen gadgets. Whenever we go to the Lake District, we often go up to Windermere, which is very near where we usually stay, and I often want to make a beeline for the Lakeland shop. I love Lakeland, okay? I'm unashamed that I love going to Lakeland. I love browsing it more than buying things, to be honest. I love seeing all the weird and wonderful gadgets you can get for everything. I mean, obviously you can get things like garlic peelers and pineapple corers, and I mean, if you name it, you know, if you could think of it, there's probably a gadget in Lakeland somewhere that does it, you know, for the kitchen at least. There are tools for every imaginable kitchen need and tools for every unimaginable kitchen need as well. However, having an endless array of kitchen gadgets will not, unfortunately, make you a better cook. It won't make me a better cook either. You know, I really enjoy cooking, but after a while, your kitchen can get so cluttered with gadgets that you're trying to use 20 different things to do a job you could really just do quite easily with something like a knife. And actually, the best cooks don't really use all these fancy gadgets. They use very simple tools. You know, Japanese chefs very famously only use 1 or 2 knives to do basically everything. You know, and they do amazing, amazing food preparation. In fact, while I was looking for this stuff for this sermon, I was looking on YouTube for Japanese chefs or Japanese knife skills. If you ever look for Japanese chef knife skills on YouTube, you'll find some amazing videos about how they use knives, and they use sometimes huge carving knives in very delicate ways. The point is that they don't feel a need to clutter up their lives by trying to gain lots of things. They take what they've already got and they use them to the best of their ability. And somebody once said, and I think this is right, that wisdom is knowledge rightly applied. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Wisdom is knowledge rightly applied. That we can have all sorts of knowledge in our lives, but if we don't apply it, if we don't use it properly, then we're not being wise with it. We're just keeping it there to kind of stagnate, really. 2 Peter 1:3 says, by his divine power, God has given us everything we need for living a godly life. You know, it says, we have received all this by coming to know him, actually the one who called us to himself by means of his marvelous glory and excellence. Yeah, we can be people who sometimes underestimate what we already have in our lives. That we have been given some knowledge already. We already have the knowledge, hopefully, of our salvation in Jesus Christ. And if we apply that knowledge and actually use that, then we can be people who have great wisdom, even with a very small amount. Jesus used that parable of the widow's mite, where he sees all these people dropping huge amounts of money into the temple, and this widow comes along and gives just the only coin she has. If all you have is one little coin of knowledge, if you're using that appropriately and wisely, you're doing much more with it than all those rich people. Yeah, I'm not trying to mix my metaphors too much here. Just understand that actually you are given enough for today. Now, that doesn't mean you don't need to grow in knowledge. That just means that actually what we have already, if we can apply that and use that, you will be wise. I know some people, lovely, lovely people, who I think of as very simple people. And I don't mean that in a terrible way. That sounds terrible when I say simple, okay? But what I mean is people who actually don't crave lots of things or lots of knowledge, but they are very wise with what they have. Some of the most prophetic and wonderful people who I speak into my lives are not people who would do very well on my quiz, for instance, or not people who would have a full set of commentaries, certainly not just to look good on the shelf. You know, they are people who have understood and really got the best out of what they've already got. And of course, hopefully they're seeking more knowledge, but what they already have, they really use to its fullest. You know, just like the Japanese chefs, they're using what they have, the best tools they have to hand, to the absolute fullest, rather than trying to go and get something more because they feel inadequate about what they have. So, let's go to the next slide. So that means we should be prepared as well. I just said that we don't want to have too much. We don't want to be the sort of people who basically own every tool under the sun but don't know how to use it. There are some people who have every tool, but they couldn't make an IKEA spice rack if you tried. There are other people who don't really have many tools at all, and we need to be careful that we're not those people either. When I first started going out with Grace, and Grace, I apologise, I have told this story in public before, so hopefully you'll forgive me, but I would go to her house and do odd jobs that needed sorting out. Yeah, good boyfriend, thank you very much. I was trying to earn my brownie points. And I remember for the first time when I said, do you have any tools that I could use? I can't remember what it was I was fixing. Well, she came out with this screwdriver, and well, you wouldn't believe it if you'd seen it, to be honest. This screwdriver was a bit like, I think it actually really had genuinely come from a Christmas cracker. It was a tiny little thing where the blade of the screwdriver had been worn down almost to a nub. It would be been used so much. And it was supposed to be a Phillips crosshead screwdriver, but basically it almost had no head to it at all. And that was her complete tool set. That's what she had. Now, as I said, to be fair to it had been worn to a nub because she had used it very successfully for years. She was very proud of her screwdriver. It took a while before we could get rid of the screwdriver. I did manage to get some other tools into the house, but she held onto that screwdriver very tightly and proudly for a long time. She put what she had to good use, there's no doubt about that, but she definitely needed more tools to properly get the job done. She kind of stuck in one place, and she'd stuck in one place to the point where actually the tool she was using was ground down. And I think we can be those sorts of people where actually we have a little knowledge and we use it very wisely maybe, but what we also need to do is grow that knowledge as well. Wisdom cannot just stagnate. There's a famous quote by Alexander Pope. Let's go into this, which says, "A little learning is a dangerous thing." Now we often say now a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. But the point is the same, that actually sometimes we can think we have all we need to know and we can act on that and act unwisely. I mean, if there's any example that's come up recently, I'm thinking about these people who got a little knowledge, false knowledge from, I think, Facebook and so on about 5G phone masts and started tearing them down, thinking that they were causing coronavirus. Sometimes we can have this little bit of misinformation, little bit of bad knowledge, and we can act on it, and it can be a very dangerous thing. Destroying communications networks at a time when everybody's isolated is not a clever thing to do. So we need to be careful that actually we don't keep ourselves ignorant either. Just as I've said, we don't need to constantly pursue knowledge just for its own sake. We also need to make sure that we don't keep ourselves ignorant. We need to grow in knowledge and understanding. And that is why Paul says, let's have a look back to this side. Paul says, "I pray that your love will overflow more and more and that you will keep on growing in knowledge and understanding." Now, bear in mind, he says knowledge and understanding. The understanding is a key part of the knowledge. If you just have knowledge by itself, then you haven't really grown. But if you have knowledge and understanding of that knowledge, understanding of what it means and how to apply it, that there is wisdom. So, sorry, back to me for a second. There you go. So I lost myself there. So I just said, don't spend all your time studying. And I've also said, make sure that you do study in order to grow. I just want to make sure it's nice and clear that it's like the tools I was talking about. If I'm doing a task, I need the right tools. If I don't have them, then I should get the right tools. So if I'm under-equipped, I should be fully equipped. But if I'm just buying tools just for the sake of buying tools because I like to have a shed full of rotary saws or something, then actually that is not very helpful. That is being over-equipped, and that is missing the point that the tools are supposed to be there for a job. So if you're going to actually use all the tools that you have and really going to use them, then absolutely gain them. But otherwise, you should focus on using what you have productively and wisely. That is how you can be wise with the things you have. I think one of the best tools we have, of course, as Christians is the Bible. And so this is why, going back to this, Psalm 119 verse 11 says, "I have hidden your word in my heart that I might not sin against you." One of the best ways we can be equipped is by just storing God's knowledge, God's word inside our heart. So we need to make sure that we are doing that we need to make sure we're growing in knowledge, but also understanding that knowledge, understanding what we're reading, and seeking to use that wisely to benefit people around us. Now, this is what my next point, that true wisdom really comes from humility. That actually the knowledge that we get isn't just about us growing and understanding because we're so clever that we've read books, and the wisdom that we have isn't just generated by us. There's a verse that many people have heard, which says, fear of the Lord is the foundation of wisdom. Knowledge of the Holy One results in good judgment. That's from Proverbs 9:10. Fear of the Lord doesn't just mean simply fear. When we hear fear of the Lord, for some people that is, oh my goodness, God is this big, spiteful, angry God who's going to smite us. And that's not what it means, really. God is powerful, and he's described in ways such as like fire or a lion. Now, a fire or a lion, those are both things that in one sense, yes, you can fear them, but you don't live in fear of them. You just recognize that they need to be respected. You need to treat them properly, otherwise you're going to get burned or mauled. God is the same. God is powerful, and God absolutely has the ability to completely destroy us, and we've seen that happen in the Bible. But that doesn't mean that he's going to do that, or even that he wants to do that. Actually, what we have to do is respect God. We have to recognize that he is majestic and powerful and strong enough that actually it's only him that can really grant true wisdom to us. Our wisdom comes from him and not from ourselves. And until we put ourselves in that humble position, we will never really have wisdom. Let's go back to the presentation for a second. I think sometimes we can imagine that we will get enough knowledge to get wisdom, and that will help us find God. If you have a look at this diagram, I think we start off with the idea that the more knowledge we can get, the more books we read, the more conferences we go to, the wiser we will get, and somehow that wisdom will help us find God. But actually, the way the Bible presents it is the other way around. That by finding God, by knowing God, we will gain humility. We will understand who God is and how majestic he is and how big he is. And we will learn to rely on his wisdom. By relying on his wisdom, we get that humility, and then we gain wisdom for ourselves. James 1:5-7 says, if you need wisdom, ask our generous God and he will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking. But when you ask him, make sure your faith is in God alone. Do not waver, for a person with divided loyalty is as unsettled as a wave of the sea that is blown and tossed by the wind. Such people should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Their loyalty is divided between God and the world, and they are unstable in everything they do. So we need to recognize that our wisdom comes from God only, that we cannot generate our own wisdom and use that to find God. We have to seek God, and that is wise in itself. Just like Solomon did. Solomon sought God first. Solomon recognized that actually he was not able to lead his kingdom without God. So he sought God in a wise and humble way. And because of this wiseness, because of this wisdom and humility, he was then granted even more. That he was granted not just wisdom, but actually fame and power and wealth, because he was able to just say, God, you are primary in my life. You are first and I am second. There's a whole series of videos, again, you can find them on YouTube, I think, called I Am Second. And each one of them is somebody expressing how they are all famous people that mostly famous in America, to be fair, more than in the UK, but still famous celebrities who are expressing that despite all their fame and importance, they are seconds to God. They are not the most primary and important person in their lives. And through that humility, through that wisdom, they have gained the other things that we can sometimes look up to them and think, well, how can I be like them? Well, we can be like them by recognizing that actually nobody is like their God. Nobody is like our God. If we put God first, then actually he will lift us up. And so we have to just be people who are humble in front of God. Otherwise, we're never going to get the wisdom that we so desire. And I hope we do desire it. Let's go back to the presentation. And this is what it says in 1 Corinthians 1:18-31. It says, the message of the cross is foolish to those who are headed for destruction, but we who are being saved know it is the very power of God. As the scriptures say, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise and discard the intelligence of the intelligent. So where does this leave the philosophers, the scholars, and the world's brilliant debaters? God has made the wisdom of this world look foolish. Since God in his wisdom saw to it that the world would never know him through human wisdom, he has used our foolish preaching to save those who believe. It is foolish to the Jews who ask for signs from heaven, and it is foolish to the Greeks who seek human wisdom. So when we preach that Christ was crucified, the Jews are offended, and the Gentiles say it's all nonsense. But to those called by God to salvation, both Jews and Gentiles, Christ is the power of God and the wisdom of God. This foolish plan of God is wiser than the wisest of human plans, and God's weakness is stronger than the greatest of human strength. Remember, dear brothers and sisters, that few of you were wise in the world's eyes, or powerful or wealthy when God called you. Instead, God chose things the world considers foolish in order to shame those who think they are wise. And he chose things that are powerless to shame those who are powerful. God chose things despised by the world, things counted as nothing at all, and used them to bring to nothing what the world considers important. As a result, no one can ever boast in the presence of God. God has united you with Christ Jesus. For our benefit, God made him to be wisdom itself. Christ made us right with God, he made us pure and holy, and he freed us from sin. Therefore, as the scriptures say, if you want to boast, boast only about the Lord. Well, I mean, I was going to sort of tell you all that, but I just thought Paul says it a lot better in Corinthians. We are people who are flawed. We recognize that. And to be honest, if God didn't use flawed people, he'd have nobody to use, because only Jesus was perfect. So, we are flawed people. We don't need to worry about that. Actually, we can recognize that God can lift us up as flawed people, that we are not wise on our own strength. That doesn't mean we can't be wise. That doesn't mean we can't have wisdom. We just have to rely on God to grant us wisdom, because by ourselves we're never going to attain it. We're not going to buy a book or go to a conference and gain enough wisdom to find God by ourselves. And we need to make sure that we're obviously trying to build our knowledge up, but first of all we need to be seeking God first. I've used that verse over and over again. I'm trying not to use it again, but it is one of my favorite verses, and I just think if we remember to seek God first, then all the other things will be added to us. We need to make sure that we are people who are humble before God, so that God can make sure that we have the wisdom we want. So to sum it all up, knowledge in itself is not wisdom. We must make sure that we don't just pursue knowledge for its own sake. We need to apply that knowledge. It's the application of the knowledge that is going to really be the wise thing that we do. And we still need to be prepared. Just as much as we shouldn't chase after knowledge itself, we also need to build ourselves up and be prepared as well. We need to be wise about the knowledge that we seek, and we need to be wise about how much we look for. And true wisdom is in humbly submitting to God, because only by humbly submitting to God can we be the people we want to be. So I hope that's been helpful for you. Not a terribly long message today, but hopefully gets to the point. And I'm trying to be wise with how I keep to my time with the sermons. So yeah, I hope that blesses you today. And I know that for some of you that will be an encouragement. For some of you, you'll feel like, oh my goodness, how can I possibly do this? Hopefully you've gained from this the idea that if you just spend time with God, if you seek God truly and honestly with all of your heart, then all the wisdom you need can be given to you. And that's as simple as it gets, really. Okay. Thank you very much for spending time with me. Thank you very much for listening to my message, and I hope you do get to share this with other people. If you're somebody who doesn't know Jesus already, if you don't know God already, then please feel free to contact us. You can contact us through the Facebook page of Mount of Olives. You can contact us through YouTube. There are various different ways. If you just go to mountofolives.church, you can find contact details for us there. I would love to think that somebody who's watching this has maybe heard these concepts for the first time. And if you're somebody who's heard this 10 times over, well, that's great. Now you need to go and apply it, don't you? That is what wisdom is truly about. So if you've heard this lesson plenty of times before and you think, yes, I understand everything he said, well then please go and apply it. Go and use your wisdom to spread that message about Jesus. All right, have a fantastic week. I love you lots, and I will see you all soon. Okay, bye-bye.